An odd fact about criminal punishment is that it involves doing something to somebody that in other circumstances would be considered immoral. The execution of criminals has been, through most of human history, accepted in cultures that held that murder is immoral. Kidnapping is widely understood to be the taking of a person from one place to another against their will, or the confinement of a person to a controlled space. And yet imprisonment is taken to be a legitimate punishment for kidnapping. And what is imprisonment but the taking of a person from one place to another against their will, or the confinement of a person to a controlled space? And fines are considered a legitimate form of punishment for people who are told that hand over your money or suffer the consequences is a paradigm example of robbery. So how can punishment be justified when the acts performed by those who punish are acts of a type that are generally prohibited? This is one of the puzzles that any theory of punishment would have to address, and this video will provide a brief overview of some of those theories. Now, theories of punishment are generally divided up according to whether they are forward-looking or backward-looking. Forward-looking theories justify punishment in virtue of the benefits that a society can harvest. All we have to do is imagine a society in which all punishment has been abolished. Let's assume that the government decrees that as of midnight, there will be no more punishment. Most of us would be afraid to live in such a society. There's been, 5 Purge movies so far, and they're working on a 6th? The question of what would happen if we removed all punishment is an empirical question. Perhaps somebody someday can run an experiment. However, I highly suspect that if people were given a choice between having punishments or no punishments, most would vote to continue a system of punishments. And the reason is so that we as a society can avoid the harms and abuses that would exist without them. Deterrence, then, is one of the justifications for punishment. We threaten to punish those who murder, rape, assault others, take property without consent, destroy the property of others without consent, engage in reckless behaviors such as drunk or distracted driving, fail to repay debts or honor contracts, run red lights, drive down the wrong side of the street, and the like, mostly as a way to make it the case that people don't do these things, and this allows us to enjoy a little bit of security in our lives. Another type of forward-looking theory holds that the goal of punishment is rehabilitation or reform. Punishment is put up as an alternative to entering some type of rehabilitation program. Or one subset of this type of theory holds that punishment itself can be justified in virtue of providing moral education, getting the convict to understand and appreciate the wrongness of their conduct. We can perhaps get some insight into this form of punishment by looking at parental punishment. Why do parents punish? Well, it's because they're mean and vicious creatures eager for any excuse to introduce misery and suffering into the lives of their children. Unfortunately, this is sometimes true, but it's not the norm, and it's not justification for punishment. In the case of better parents, it's argued that punishment is to shape the moral character of the person the child will become. John Stuart Mill argued that the behavior that a child at first performs as a means to acquiring a reward or avoiding a punishment, the child soon comes to value for its own sake. The child at first keeps promises to avoid being yelled at, and later the child prides herself on her honesty and keeps promises because it's the right thing to do. Criminal punishment is, on this account, simply the model of parental punishment applied to those who violate the laws. In this, we can see one of the objections to this theory. It involves treating criminals, or all adults actually, like children. One objection to these forward-looking theories is that it is always reasonable to ask, does it work? We hear this objection often in the case of capital punishment. Does capital punishment really work to lower the number of murders? If punishment is not bringing about a desired end, then it's not justified. If a form of punishment does work, it does bring about its desired end, there's another problem. For all practical purposes, forward-looking theories of punishment all say the same thing. All forward-looking theories of punishment say, in effect, it's permissible to punish you because we benefit from doing so. In the case of capital punishment, it says we're justified in killing you because in doing so, we may prevent some other person from committing murder. Even if it works, how can it be the case that one person deserves to be put to death as a way of controlling the behavior of another person? Sometimes forward-looking theories of punishment attempt to justify punishment on the grounds that the person punished is unable to commit a future crime. Capital punishment is sometimes defended on the grounds that the person who is executed can't commit another murder. Now, let's assume that we come up with a psychology test or a brain scan that we can give to college students. And with this test, we can identify a block of students that have a 35% chance of committing a future violent crime. Would it be permissible to punish these people to prevent them from committing a future crime? On the principle that it is permissible to harm others if it produces a benefit for society, in ancient Athens, slavery was defended in part on the grounds that it produced a benefit for society. The institution of slavery allowed a few people to live a life of luxury. Those who live a life of luxury can then devote themselves to art and music and theater and philosophy and the affairs of government. These, the artistic products of the luxury class, are what make a culture great. Assume that this is true. Would the benefits to society, at least to that part of society not being punished or enslaved, justify the harms inflicted? To escape the problems that we find in forward-looking theories, some theorists prefer backward-looking or retributivist theories. Backward-looking theories say that the reason you are being punished is because of what you did. What you did was wrong. And those who lie, cheat, steal, vandalize, assault, rape, and murder others deserve some sort of harsh treatment in return. Now, the classic form of a retributivist theory is called lex talionis, or an eye for an eye. It says, that which you do to others, let that be done to you. Under lex talionis, we see an easy answer to the question of why it is justified to execute murderers, imprison kidnappers, and impose fines on thieves. Now, lex talionis might make a nice slogan, but it doesn't work too well in practice. In some cases, there's no comparable act to perform. What would be the penalty for fondling a child, for example, or for attempted murder? Rule number 229 in the Code of Hammurabi said the following, quote, if a builder has built a house for a man and has not made his work sound, and the house he built has fallen and caused the death of its owner, the builder shall be put to death. And if it's the owner's son that is killed, the builder's son shall be put to death, end quote. So we need something that at least makes a bit more sense. The version of retributivism that exists says that the punishment must fit the crime. Typically, this means that the harms inflicted on the perpetrator must somehow match or be proportional to the seriousness of the wrong done. By the way, if you ever asserted, I am innocent, as a defense against punishment, then you assumed the punishment is based on retributivist reasons, and it's wrong to punish the innocent. Forward-looking theories look to the future. The past, whether you actually committed the crime or not, isn't directly relevant. Now, one of the main objections to retributivist theories asks the question, how can you deserve punishment? Is it like there's some magical cosmic scale where wrongdoing makes it tilt in one direction and punishing the perpetrator counters the weight of the wrongdoing? Another objection says that ultimately it's not really retribution, it's revenge. What's really behind the retributivist sentiment is a desire to cause harm. And if we're to look at retributivism honestly, it really goes like this. The reason we are hurting you is because we want to hurt you. It makes us feel good. It gives us a sense of deep satisfaction to see you suffer like this. But making other people suffer because it feels good is, at least in many cases, not taken to be a very good reason to make people suffer. So we're looking at two basic reasons for punishment. There's a forward-looking reason. We punish you because doing so will produce a future benefit. And there's a backward-looking reason. We punish you because making you suffer for what you did is a good thing. It's what you deserve. There are people who argue that punishment can never be justified and that institutions of punishment should be abolished. Of course, they'll need to provide evidence that it's possible to have a safe and secure society without punishment. Some abolitionists accept a restitution theory. If you take $50 from somebody, then, well, it's not yours. You should give it back, plus an additional amount, which is determined by the additional cost that you've imposed on not only the victim, but on other people. Technically, it doesn't seem that demands for restitution are punishment. Punishment involves taking something from you, inflicting a harm, taking your money in the form of a fine, or taking your liberty in the form of imprisonment, or taking your life. Taking something that is not yours and giving it back to its rightful owner is not punishment. Of course, restitution seems a bit problematic with respect to some crimes, including the most significant crimes, such as those that cause death or permanent injury, or crimes against people, such as assault or abuse, that leave no telltale physical marks. An interesting type of case for this type of theory asks, what if a criminal act happens to produce a benefit for the victim? In Baltimore, somebody robbing a convenience store shot a customer in the head. The customer had obsessive compulsive disorder. As a result of the brain damage, this person recovered without the OCD and arguably had a better life as a result of being shot. Or somebody is victimized and the story of their ordeal earns a six-figure book deal and movie rights. So how do we justify punishment? A few years ago, a drunk driver ran into a car being driven by my friend's wife. Their 2-year-old son was killed. She was permanently injured. What is the appropriate response to that type of behavior? What can we defend?